George Lucas gets this book and he reads it and he's like, oh my gosh, if this is true and every single story of all time follows this, it's been successful, I'm going to make a movie based on that. And he creates the very first version of Star Wars. Hey, this is Russell. Welcome back to my vault. Today I've got an insanely cool book, one of the greatest books of all time that you've probably never heard of, but has definitely influenced you both in your personal life and probably your business life as well. It is called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. And this not only is a copy of the book, this is a copy of the first edition of Hero with 1,000 Faces. And so if you've ever heard the story of the hero's journey, it all started with this man right here, Mr. Joseph Campbell. This first edition copy I paid $500 for, and this book has got so many cool stories that I cannot wait to share with you today. The first time I heard about Hero with 1,000 Faces, I was at a marketing seminar, and I believe it was Perry Belcher on stage. He was talking about storytelling and things like that. And he referenced like, hey, there's this book by Joseph Campbell called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And so I didn't know much about it other than that. But whenever anyone recommends a book, especially someone I respect like Perry, I on Amazon buy it. So I bought a copy of the first edition that came to me. And I didn't read it for a while. And then later I started hearing more and more stories about it. As I got deeper into understanding storytelling and story selling, I kept coming up over and over and over again for me. So I started doing some research. And the first thing I found out about this book that was super fascinating was there was a guy, you may have heard of him before, but he got a copy of this book and he started reading it. And that guy's name was George Lucas. And George read this entire book and he realized that the framework that Joseph Campbell talks about in here is the framework to tell stories. What Joseph Campbell did in his studies, he went back in time. He went back through every generation time, all the way back to like basically Adam. And then also everywhere like around the world, different cultures. And he started looking at how all these people told their myths, their stories, their legends. And we realized is when we started looking from culture to culture, area to area, time period to time period, every single person told their story in almost the exact same way. They all followed this sequence of events that he called the hero's journey. Now, Campbell's version of it, there's 17 steps. I'm not going to go through all 17 steps, but the basic gist of it is the hero starts in an ordinary world, right? Then the hero hears the call to adventure. And then right after he hears the call to adventure, he has a refusal to call, like, no, I don't want to do that. But then he decides to go on the journey anyway. So he leaves his ordinary world and he goes on this journey. As he goes on the journey, he meets this guide and the guide takes him and goes through this whole journey, right? And if you look at almost any movie, even nowadays, they follow this process. They follow this path. I always think about like, if you read Lord of the Rings or watch it, like J.R. Tolkien literally followed this process, right? Frodo Baggins starts the journey in the Shire, his ordinary world, right? And also here's this called adventure. Bilbo comes and brings him the ring and like, you need to take this ring to Mordor and destroy it. It's called adventure. And then Frodo's like, no, not me. I'm a little halfling. I'm not even a real person. Like, refuses the call. But then they talk him into, he decides to go do it. And then as soon as he does, then who shows up? Gandalf the Grey, the guide shows up and takes him on this journey. And the entire Lord of the Rings follows the hero's journey to a T, right? And it happens in movie after movie. And so that's why The Hero with 1,000 Faces is so fascinating, because it's the framework of how we understand stories. And honestly, if you think about it, it's each of our framework. I think the reason why we as humans resonate with it so much subconsciously, even when we don't know it, right? Even if you watch all these movies, you had no idea that every movie follows basically the same storyline. We still relate to it because it's our story, right? It's our story of growth and change. Like you think about this, like for most of us, like we start, like we are in our ordinary world, and somewhere along the line, you decide you want to step up. You want to start a business. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be an athlete. You wanted to leave your ordinary world to become something different, right? And then if you left that world, it was probably scary for you. You refused the call and then eventually decided to go for it anyway. And then you met a guide along the way, and the guide took you on a journey, right? And throughout the journey, you had trials and you had ups and downs. The hero's journey is our story, which is why I think we resonate at such a deep subconscious level. And so for me, when I first read this book, I started understanding, I started thinking, how can I use this when I'm speaking to my audience, right? How can I weave this into my presentations? And at the time, we were launching ClickFunnels. I was trying to write webinars for it. I started thinking, instead of me just like telling random stories, what if I took this story framework and story structure, I started like actually telling my stories differently? Not just me telling the stories the way I thought off the top of my head, but actually following that process of me following the hero's journey and sharing it. If it's the same story framework that's persuaded people for thousands of years in every culture of all time, would it be the same framework I would need to tell stories to move my audience, to move my people? I look at this now a decade later as I've weaved this into most everything I've done, from webinars to live events to challenges. The hero's journey framework I use over and over and over again. In fact, if you read the Expert Seekers book, I literally teach everybody the hero's journey framework and how I weaved it into my presentations. And so what's fascinating is, did this work? Yes. Right? I look on the back end of 10 years of applying this to my business specifically. I run a software company, for crying out loud. Like people are like, oh yeah, this works in movies. I understand. Oh yeah, it works for storybooks. I understand. It's like, I run a software company, right? And I heard the story of this and I decided to use the framework. And what did it do, right? In the first 10 years of ClickFunnels, we sold over $1 billion of our products. We built a community, we built a tribe of funnel hackers, right? We changed people's lives from all around the world. And how did we do it? It's by we layered our message onto the framework found here inside of the Hero with 1,000 Faces. And that's why this book is so important to me and should be so important to you. Again, this is something that's influenced you in ways you don't even know. Every book you've read, every movie you've experienced, every webinar from me or any of my students you've gone through, all followed this framework in this journey. And so by learning it and understanding it and mastering it is the fastest way to persuade and influence and change the lives of the people you've been called to serve. Okay, now Joseph Campbell's version of the Hero with 1,000 Faces, his hero's journey is 17 steps. And honestly, it's probably more complex than what we need for our world. Like in Expert Secrets, I broke it down to closer to 10 or 14 steps. But what's interesting is that Joseph Campbell, after he wrote this book, later Christopher Vogler, who's one of the big Disney executives, he read this book and then he changed it and built a framework that's like 13 or 14 steps. It's much simpler. And if you look at this is literally the framework that they use in every single Disney movie. So if you watch Cars, Moana, Brave, Frozen, literally any Disney movie of all time, it follows Christopher Vogler's framework, which is adapted and based off of the Hero with 1,000 Faces. So I'm going to walk you guys through what this framework looks like. Okay. So I'm going to draw it like this. This is a big circle. There are two sides of this. Over here is the normal world or the ordinary world. And over here is the unknown. Okay. And so it starts up here with the hero living in the ordinary world, and then the hero hears a call to adventure. Okay, so you think about this with any movie, right? Lightning McQueen is the hero of that story, right? And he's racing with the Piston Cup. He loses, or it's a tie, and so he's got to go and drive to California to go and do this race, right? So he's had call to adventure. Like you have to leave, you go to California to have a chance to win the Piston Cup, right? Here's the call to adventure. Rocky Balboa is sitting there. He's a boxer. He's not that successful, and then all of a sudden Apollo Creed calls him up because he happens to be the Italian stallion, and he gets an opportunity to come fight, right? And so Apollo Creed calls him, brings him in, like you need to fight. You have a chance to fight the champion, right? He hears the call to adventure. Okay, so that's the first step. And then usually after the call to adventure, what happens is the refusal to call. They freak out. Rocky Balboa is like, I'm just some bum on the street. I'm not going to fight the greatest fighter of all time, right? They get scared. They don't want to, but eventually they decide to go through it. After they hear the call to adventure, the refusal to call, then they come to the next phase, which is the meeting of the mentor. Okay. So Rocky decides to say yes to the fight. Who shows up? Boom. Mick shows up and says, all right, I'm going to train you to be able to beat Apollo Creed or to be able to fight. In Cars, Doc shows up and teaches and becomes his mentor to help teach him how to be a race car, right? After they meet the mentor, it's really cross the threshold. This is where Frodo leaves the Shire. This is where Lightning McQueen gets in the car and starts driving. Like they cross the threshold here and now they're officially on the journey. During the next phase is called trials and failures. Okay, this is where they're learning lessons, they're growing, they're becoming something different, right? They go through different trials and failures, they go through growth, they get new skills. From there, they get to a spot in a phase that's called death and rebirth. Okay, on the journey, the hero has to go through something where they have their essence, the person who they are before they leave on this journey. And for the hero to transform and become who they want, the old character has to die and be reborn into a new character, right? And so it's fascinating because if you look at spirituality, Christianity, for example, like this is part of our journey. If you're a Christian, right? It's like you go on this journey and then there's a time where you have to go through death and a burial and a resurrection, which is baptism, right? But every single hero goes to that, the death of their old identity and the rebirth of who they are, the new person that's coming. Okay. From there, they have a revelation, like, oh my gosh, this is the idea, an epiphany. Like I call it an epiphany bridge in Expert Secrets. They have a revelation, an idea of like, this is how I'm going to succeed. Then they keep moving through and they go to the next section, which is where they have, they finally start getting the changes they're looking for. Boom. Then after that, then they go to the section called the atonement. Again, for the Christians, that sounds very familiar. But for most people, this is where they make right the thing they did wrong, right? They go through that. They have this thing, the atonement. After that, they get the gift. Okay. Inside of A Hero 1,000 Faces, he calls this that the hero returns back to the ordinary world with the elixir. So they figured out the solution. This is the problem. This is how we solve the problem. And then bring the gift, they bring the elixir back. And then the person returns back to the ordinary world changed. And then this is the end of the story. So that is the process. So again, you could plug in almost any movie, any story into this framework. And you see it happening over and over and over again. I remember the first time I learned this after I started watching movies, and it would almost be frustrating to me. I'm like, oh, there's the hero. There's the ordinary world. Oh, there's the guy just showed up. Oh, here's the first set of trials and errors. Oh, here's where the death is. Here's the rebirth. Here's the moment of no return, right? Here's the revelation. Here's the spot where they made up for the thing they did wrong. Here's they got the gift of they got the elixir. Now they're returning back home with it. And so you start seeing this pattern happening over and over and over again. But we change the characters, we change the circumstances, we change the situations, and it's built literally millions of TV shows, movies, stories, books. And again, I think it's the pattern of your life. All right, if you guys want, I made some show notes, put together some notes where literally you can get the entire framework, the 17 steps that Joseph Campbell uses in his version of the hero's journey. I'll also give you a copy of Christopher Vogler's version, and I'll also give you a copy of my version from Expert Secrets. So you can see 3 different variations and versions of the hero's journey. They all follow the same process, the same path. One is used for all stories, myths, things like that. This is used very specifically for Hollywood and movies, and mine is very much for how funnel hackers, marketers, business owners, they can use inside their presentations, their video sales letters, anytime they're speaking. All 3 of these will help you to see how to apply the hero's journey into your life, into your business, into all the things you're doing. So if you want that, in the description, we'll have a link over to those notes. Other than that, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comments down below, and then click on the other videos and check them out to find out some more cool books that we're showing you off here inside the vault.